Forbes Books presents The Great Digital Transformation with Gerard Zatvani, highlighting the pioneers that reimagined possibilities and reimagined businesses. This week, we're discussing how tech has transformed talent management with Eric Friedman, the CEO of eSkill. Founded in 2002, eSkill is a talent assessment platform that offers skills tests, cognitive tests, behavioral assessments, and video interviewing. We're going to discuss Eric's inspiration for starting the company, some of the challenges organizations must navigate when adopting new tech, and how eSkill is helping clients across a multitude of industries transform digitally. Hey, Jerry, how are you? It looks like you're in my hometown city of New York. How's it going?
Hey Joe, I'm in Manhattan. It's really cool here. Cool also because it's a little bit cold, but it's nice to be here in New York.
And we have a very special guest this week on the pod, someone who I just found out you guys are practically family. You're almost like related somehow. So give us a quick introduction. Tell us more about Eric Friedman here.
Yes, so Eric is the CEO and founder of eSkill and also my first customer. I know him since many, many years. It was a really good business relationship and well, you know, good business sometimes takes you to friendship, and we are now family. He's the godfather of my son, so it's a really nice, long-term, very developed relationship, I would say so.
Well, that's so great. Well, Eric, it's great to meet you, and let's go way back because I know you started eSkill a couple years after you got your MBA at MIT. So let's go back way back. What was it at your time at MIT or maybe even in undergrad that prepared you or sort of inspired you to start eSkill?
Undergrad, I was a psychology major at Brown, and this got me generally intrigued about what makes people happy and where you fit in. And I knew I wanted to go into business, not psychology. So I had a couple of very non-entrepreneurial, non-technology jobs. Worked at Tiffany, actually, for a while before going to MIT. I went to MIT because I really wanted to do something in this newly emerging SaaS, software as a service space. And this was the late 90s. So when I graduated, I was looking for what would be a great idea to start a SaaS around. And at the time, there was newly emerging companies that were doing online skills testing. And we wanted to do that, myself and my original co-founder, who's no longer with the company. We wanted to do that in a way that really adapted the tests to match the job profile so you really get the best fit between the job candidates and the job. Which of course is two ways. One, you're gonna have the best people performing for you, and people doing the work are probably happier because they have a really good job skills fit. So I met Jerry when we had a couple of failed starts with a couple of US-based teams. At the time, Jerry's company had a Romanian programmer base. And I was referred to him, and we said, okay, let's have Jerry's company develop this product for us. And they did a great job. We had something turnkey ready to sell at the very end of 2002. So I hired my first salesperson to start selling it. And I mean, Jerry and I have been deeply entwined. I mean, of course, I've been running my company for 20 years, as has Jerry. So it's really, our companies are part of our lives. Our companies are part of our families. And through that, we've worked closely together for so long. That's one of the ways we began to feel like friends and then family before.
Wow. What a great story. And Jerry, I guess we should have prefaced your story by saying spoiler alert, because it turned out okay. That once you guys got together 20 years later, you're still friends and you built a great company.
You know, this entire thing, like what Eric was mentioning, these skills to job fit, it's a very transformative space. I mean, if you're thinking how people were recruited just even 10 years ago and how this match was made, and sometimes how biased this match can be, it's bringing technology to kind of transform the space and making it also very objective, making it in a way that when you recruit someone, that person it's very relevant for the job that you have in front of you. I think that is pretty transformative, especially now when you have all these stories about the gender bias and equal pay for equal jobs and all of these things. Like having ways where you can remove the bias from the process, it's really transformative and also brings a very big social value for the process.
It seems, Eric, that you were very prescient in the focus of skills, because I know you mentioned that there were other companies doing that, but people talking about skills in 2000, you must have been looking at people with like eyes glazed, like, what are you talking about? Skills-based jobs. Fast forward 2020, everyone is talking about skill-based jobs. I mean, I didn't know about the term soft skills till a couple of years ago. Now everyone's talking about soft skills. So what was it about that sort of niche of the tech industry, about skills-based job employment or job finding, that you saw that there was a future there?
I remember in the old days, I remember when I was interviewing for jobs in the 90s, they'd put me down in front of a computer and give me a typing test, or literally a typewriter, and give me a typing test. And there was maybe 1 or 2 paper and pencil tests. So skills testing in jobs has been around for a really long time. But what's really changed is the ability to test many multiple things remotely. So our early competitors maybe had tests that were canned. Microsoft Excel, take it or leave it. But we realized that jobs require a complex mix of soft and hard skills. This job might require numerical reasoning and Excel and English language at an advanced level, basic computer skills. So with technology today, we can generate an assessment from our content that covers all those things in one assessment experience. And as you guys have been talking about, having a valid, relevant assessment for a job can totally strip away the bias of where you came from, what your race or gender or background are, even where you live. And so by having those sorts of tools, you're unlocking a much larger global workforce than before, when your hiring was all local and you would see them and you would make judgments.
And a lot of companies adapt over time. And I'm curious, how is eSkill different in 2022 than it was in 2000? Is it the same mission, same driving force, but things have changed because of the world has changed? Or are you guys kind of stayed the course over these last couple decades?
Well, I love to say that our core product has stayed the course. We launched with customizable job-based tests, and that's what we still do. We never had to pivot away from that. But what we have done, we've added, of course, a lot more test content. And we had to also add things like job simulations, because we want to make it as realistic as possible. In the future, you should be able to remotely assess people based on the most realistic job-based scenarios as technology allows. So whether that's a multitasking simulation, an Excel simulation, a chat simulation, we're always trying to be at the cutting edge of developing those, because they're relevant, they're valid, they're predictive. They give the candidate a sense of what their job will actually be like. They might say, oh God, this isn't for me. I'm going to stop this test right now. Or they might want to say, hey, I want to prove myself and do great. So it's the breadth of the content, the depth, also getting into more behavioral assessments, I think really unlocks soft skills analysis.
I think what is also interesting is to see how the companies react to these tools, to this technology. And they start sometimes playing around with a little test, and then it kind of say, I like this thing. It's working out quite nicely. And how about we go deeper and broader and bring in the entire organization? So it's really, I know that you have quite a number of customers that went through the journey like this, where they start with something small, and I think that may be relevant for you to tell us a little bit the story.
Sure. Human resource departments, or talent management departments, as they're sometimes more fashionably known these days, they generally have not been the most technologically progressive buyers. They tend to stick with what they know, stick with what has shown to have low liability, and it's a slow sale to get them to adopt new technologies. I mean, like Monster.com used to be like really cutting edge. like don't advertise on paper, advertise on Monster. So assessments are one of those things that are still up and coming. A lot of our clients, especially government clients, they were doing pencil and paper assessments at a statewide, if not national scale before they came to eSkill. So that alone is process transformative. What we sometimes have, in the case of governments, call centers, some global non-governmental organizations, you'll have one division that will go for eSkill, implement it, to see all their metrics improve, speed to hire, lower cost to hire, more accuracy in hiring, easier to use and implement for their internal HR people so they spend less time doing hiring related activities. They become our champions. They will invite us to their conferences and we'll get a chance to pitch or network with other divisions, other people in their ecosystem, and that's how we've expanded a lot of our markets.
It's fun to see how this adoption, you actually see it happening. You see it like how they pull you in. You see that how they see the value, how they measure it, and they pull you in, and like the adoption of the technology becomes bigger and bigger, and you see the transformation happening, as you go. It's fascinating.
And I want to tell you a personal anecdote. I remember some of the first jobs that I had after college, before business school, were painfully mismatched to my behavioral profile, if not my skills. And I just remember sitting there at desks, jobs, like zoning out, procrastinating, because I really didn't like these tasks, and I just didn't want to do it. And I would make myself do it. And I was smart enough, and I knew how to use the computer, I knew how to use the programs they wanted me to use, but they didn't have the technology or to properly assess me to know where in the company I might have been a better fit. And so think about me multiplied by millions and millions of people across all these organizations and how much lost productivity and unhappiness is the result. So now, today, when you have very easy to use tools that can assess your behavioral profile, no, you're going to be a great match for an inside sales rep, not for a computer programmer. And you have the skills to start day one on this programming language, this accounting software. That will enable people to be so much more productive if organizations start using it and can use it globally. So you don't have to hire in your local town anymore.
So we are thinking productivity here, productivity there. But when I'm thinking about this thing, is like, look at how job satisfaction grows. Look at the happiness that you can bring to people just by doing something that is more relevant to them. It is very transformative, and when organizations bring this technology in, it transforms their organization. It also transforms the way they build the teams. There is one organization that even tests not just persons, but also teams, which is quite interesting way of looking at how the team dynamic is being created and how it evolves.
What's interesting, Eric, I want to go back to you talking about your HR experience working with HR teams. And one thing I've noticed over the years of speaking to HR professionals is that their job one is to not have the company get sued. Like, that's basically, at the end of the day, do whatever you want, but just don't get us sued. So you come in with your bag of tricks. How do you, I hate to use these sort of businessy terms, how do you bridge the gap from that old school thinking of we're here to hire and not get sued, and to you coming in and sort of transforming the company from within?
Sure, I can definitely get into the weeds in some of that. In the assessment world, you have to know that your tests, your assessments are valid. And what does validity mean? It means that there's a correlation between how you do and then how you'll perform on the job. And it should generally be free of bias. Although, if there is no other way to assess somebody's fitness for a job, then it actually technically is allowed to have some adverse impact. As adverse impact is when it does scores poorly some protected group. So it gets complex. Now, skills tests like typing test, Excel test, numerical reasoning, they have what's called face value. You can see, okay, this job requires Excel. Here's an Excel test. These questions look like Excel. It's almost self-validating. You don't need to jump to prove this is a relevant test. Behavioral assessments that assess your psychological profile will ask indirect questions. Like, do you prefer to live deep in the woods or in a busy city, on a spectrum? And that answer is ultimately supposed to correlate to your ability to perform at some job. Those require more extensive validation, where you have to show that people answer a certain way tend to do better certain jobs. When you have that validation, then you can sell it to HR departments, who often will ask to show them the validation, or at least assure them this has been validated.
Interesting. And how important is this data that you've accumulated over the last 20 years? Because your company's only getting quote unquote smarter, because now you have 20 years of data that got you here, correct?
Yeah, so we do have standard tests that are, here's a standard administrative assistant test that you can use that you haven't edited. Those have global percentiles. So if you take that test, you will see how you did against everyone in the world who's ever taken this test, which will have some meaning. The best meanings are if you have an assessment you give your best performers in your company, and how will someone perform, those benchmarks are more meaningful.
It's also very interesting to see which types of jobs trend where. I think you can see also, depending on the economic conditions and how the testing fluctuates up and down. It's a very interesting way of looking at data and understanding how the economy is doing, what types of jobs are more in demand than others. It gives you relevant information. But also having the amount of data and being able to run validations in different ways, this is actually a way of the technology validating tests, which removes liability, legal liability. You were talking about the liability and the legal department and the HR department not being sued. Well, because of the data, because you have so many things done in the past, you can do more and more and better validation that actually at the end of the day protects the recruiting departments.
And Eric, let's talk about the recruiting department, how recruiting and talent management has changed over the last couple decades. You've been there at the forefront with eSkill. How has it changed? How different is it now? We've talked about, eliminating some of the biases as much as we possibly can in this day and age. But how is it now as compared to what it was 20 years ago?
Well, one interesting thing that's come out of it is the metrics people used to care about were much more limited 20 years ago than today. So a client of ours might have access now to over 800 different assessments they can give, skill assessments. And it completely opens their mind as what should we be assessing? Maybe typing score, isn't enough anymore. So now we should test attention to detail. Now we should give them a behavioral assessment to see how they are on 10 different dimensions of their personality and how that's relevant to this job. So it's really elevated how holistic an HR department or a hiring manager can view candidates and find out people who could be really strong. Maybe they didn't do so well on Microsoft Word tests, but they do really well in other things that make them worthwhile training. It also has opened up a much larger box of, okay, how do we figure out who inside the company, who may be in a completely different job, might be a great fit for this job? So when you have a cloud-based platform, you can do that. It's very, very easy to have other people in the company take this job-based assessment if they're interested, and then you find internal candidates who might even be better fit for this job than whatever you stuck them in 10 years ago. So those are two ways it's transformed. Video interviewing, something else that we do that has really changed the dynamic. We've all had job interviews. Usually it has to be local. Numerous hiring managers have to take time out of their day to make sure they sit with you at that time that you're there. And that results in not many people really being able to be interviewed. When you have recordable one-way interviews, which means that as part of the assessment, you can ask the candidate some questions and have them respond on camera, create a recording. Then the HR department, the hiring managers can watch 20 of those in a session on their own time. The candidate anywhere in the world may have done it in their time, score them, and that also opens up a lot more opportunity for talented people to express themselves and say, wow, that person was as amazing on camera. I would totally want them to be a customer service rep, even if they didn't do so well in the chat simulation.
And I want to talk about skills for a second here, because I remember I spoke to a recruiter a couple of years ago, and they said something to the fact that when people use the term transferable skills, recruiters didn't believe in that. They're like, we will hire you based on past experience. We don't believe in transferable skills. Well, thanks to a pandemic and lack of people filling jobs, they're like, oh yeah, that thing about skills, we're going to start hiring people based on skills. So talk to me about that shift of going from we're only going to put round pegs into round holes. We're not going to try any other way of doing things. How has that changed, and especially in how has eSkill played in that role?
That trend, I think, is a very healthy trend. It's often called merit-based hiring or skills-based hiring. So like you said, like not hiring someone based on their diploma, where they went to school, what titles they've had at other prestigious companies. I mean, those things can correlate with some success, but it's no guarantee. And that eliminates a lot of people who could be incredibly sharp and incredibly talented who just didn't have those opportunities. So the labor shortages that we've had at various times, most recently, we've had a very, very tight labor market these past 2 or 3 years. And COVID forces employers to say, wow, we need more people who are good. What are we going to do? So it forced them to be open-minded about where they got their candidates from. So when you have a tool like ours, really plays very well into that mindset, because you have a job requirement. You can configure an assessment that has multiple skills at the right skill levels for this job, a behavioral profile. And it doesn't matter where you went to school. It doesn't matter what jobs you've had. If you can get a good score on that, that should get you at the head of the line for consideration.
You know, you can also test for potential. It's like, okay, what would be the prerequisite for this person to be trained for this job? So you don't necessarily test for the skills required for the job, but you test for what would be required to actually start the training for the job. This is also happening in the industry. So you identify, and it can be, you know, obviously we talk a lot about recruiting and everything, but it doesn't have to be external recruiting. It can be internal recruiting too. So you're going inside your organization and you understand who does what and what are the potential people inside your organization, and then you can test and see, well, maybe they are a good match for an opportunity that you have inside your organization. You train them, you upskill them, and you basically change their future. So for me, it's very inspiring when you can do these kind of things, where you can look at not what kind of a diploma that person had or what kind of a high school they went to, but really look at, okay, are they able to do the job or not? Are they ambitious enough to want to learn for that job or not? And how can you help them to get there? You know, so and assessing and understanding where they are, and then teaching them and bringing them and to the level that you need them to be. It's really a life-changing experience for many people. I personally have been through this with my company, and we have done this extensively, and it's a very powerful tool in the way we develop people and the way we develop talent. And that's a very transformative way of using technology, and it's like it's for real. It changes someone's life that maybe would have not thought of a possibility like this.
You just pulled that from my brain, Jerry, because that's where I was going with next about changing lives. And Eric, I'm just curious, as that young, scrappy entrepreneur back in the early 2000s trying to build a company, I know you're probably trying to build something that's successful. It's going to change lives. But did you realize that you would be able to change lives? Was that even part of your thinking process at the time? Or were you just like, man, I just want a company that's going to survive and do well? Did you know the impact, especially, not knowing that it will be here 22 years later, but did you know that you would have this effect on human beings for decades?
Well, I certainly hope that's our trajectory. I hope that happens. Like you said, I think at that time, it seemed like a good idea. The whole idea of getting people fitting into the right jobs and being high performers and happy in the way that I didn't used to be at that old job is in the back of my mind. But truly, well, yeah, when you're bootstrapping a company and you see news stories of your competitors raising $20 million like every other week, there was a little tough. And I was pretty focused on that. And how do we get to the next step? How do we get to the next feature? How do we get to the next hire? So yeah, that was the practical side was on my mind.
And how did you get out of your own head out of that? Like, because, you know, it's always this sort of like a comparison trap we get into. I'm sure you were looking at other people in your business were signing up clients, fundraising. How did you pull yourself out of that and be like, hey, listen, I got to just build a good company. I got to help people. What did you do internally for yourself that got you out of that comparison trap?
I kind of haven't. I wake up paranoid every day. What are they doing? How can we be better? I'm still there, you know, maybe not quite as stressful as it used to be because, you know, we have a great team that helped me out. I guess a funny story, in the beginning of our companies, I was doing all the stuff for eSkill. I was pretty much the only employee in the beginning. I had a server. It was at a physical co-location facility in Massachusetts not far from where I lived. And when the server went down, I would call Jerry. Jerry would say, how can I help you? And I would say, the server's down. And then I would have to drive and work with him or one of his technical people on rebooting it. So it was extremely hands-on in the beginning. Now, of course, both of our companies are much larger and we have people helping us manage a lot of those frontline details. But I'm sure we're both, I can speak for myself. I mean, I'm always, I still consider myself a startup. I still consider myself a player in a small fish in a giant pond. And I just never get complacent about that.
I guess you know the company evolves and evolves past this startup situation, but that still stays within you. You know, you are not really, you're kind of still there, still involved in a lot of things. You're still with an entrepreneur mindset, and this is hard to change because this is who we are at the end of the day. And you know, it's reacting to every challenge in a very proactive way and be there on top of it. It's what defines us, I believe. So I think that is pretty accurate.
Funny that you said that, Eric, because psychologically, you almost have like that fat kid syndrome. Because I was a fat kid growing up, and I never shake that. Like, to me, I'll always be the fat kid. And to you, you're always going to be that scrappy entrepreneur driving to the server and fix it, you know, in the middle of the day. So that never leaves you.
Yes, metaphorically, I drive to the server and I fix it.
Jerry, I want to talk about what you saw in Eric and eSkill, because I think it's a law that if you're working business, you have to read Jim Collins' Good to Great, and you have to. It's sort of like a thing. They kick you out of the world of business if you haven't read that book. But they talk about all the things that made these good companies great. Early on, did you see something there with Eric and eSkill that that had the bones to become a great company?
Well, he was in a space that really made sense, that could make a lot of difference for people in general, and from a market point of view made sense. But then also, you know, I liked Eric, like a good person, basically a decent person, pretty humble. It's really with solid business understanding, with solid business knowledge, and with the, you know, like the hard-working skills, making sure that things get done and focusing and never let go, just really making sure that one step at a time we will get there relentlessly. And that inspired me. And it was really making me want to be part of the story, regardless of the problems, all the successes we celebrated or anything. For me, it was, in my mind, it was clear this will be a marathon. This will be like a long thing, and eventually the market more and more warmed to the idea, more and more has been acknowledging the value of this technology and how transformative this technology can be. And I think we are a little bit vindicated by this. So yeah, that was the story.
Awesome. You know, I had a conversation with Sarah Personette, who was a senior VP at Twitter before Elon got there. And she had this line. She goes, the old terminology of it's not personal, it's business. She says that's all BS. She says there's nothing more personal than business. And I've always had that thought. Like when people say, "Oh, I fired that guy, it's business, it's not personal." I'm like, yeah, I mean, it is personal because it's a human being. It feels like this is a very personal business for the two of you, Eric. Your collaboration, your connection. It's why Sarah's words of like business being the most personal thing it really rings true, especially in this situation.
I mean, there's two common languages that Jerry and I speak that I think have enabled us to work together for so long, have success. Look, business isn't always easy. Sometimes there's challenges that can cause some tension and you have to work through it. And those two values are one, always dealing ethically for a long-term vision of being lifelong business partners and then friends. So that's how you negotiate, how you resolve differences, how you get past challenging situations. Another language is a language of fact-based decision-making. It's very easy to get emotional, especially when you have a small company that's going through tumultuous times, and probably any business leader is going to face a lot of emotional decisions, emotional staff members. So always going back to, well, what does the data say? What do the facts say? And let's work with that. And then you can make decisions based on that without letting emotions get in the way. So I think having a long-term, very fair relationship and trying to talk business using the language of facts and what we know, what we need to do, what we need to try, that's enabled us to work together the way we have.
Yeah, Jerry, anything you want to add to that?
That's basically at the core of it, really. Everything starts with ethics. If the ethics are not in the right place, then nothing else really matters. Being aware of the impact you have in other people's life, like how how business is personal. It's always personal, because if you're not putting your heart into it, it won't work. I don't see how you can develop a business without being deeply passionate about it, how being very and even relating with other people. Like, you are effectively changing other people's lives, and if you don't care about it, if you don't feel passionate about it, then what's the point? I mean, really, what's the point of going through all this and not realizing how people are important and the transformation that you are bringing into these people's lives?
Lastly, Eric, we've talked in broad strokes about eSkills, and I'd love to get one or two anecdotes, if you can, about how you were able to transform companies. And now this is the part of the conversation where we don't want to get anyone in trouble, so you don't have to name the company. If you could just give us some sort of context as to what they do. Just give us a couple of probably jobs or people you work with that you put yourself a gold star. Like, you gave yourself a gold star, like, yes, we nailed that one. We did that well. We helped transform that company. Do you have any that come to mind?
Sure. Well, one of them, I guess, would be the unnamed, very well-known international non-government organization that brought us on to replace old-fashioned tests. And one of the things we developed for them, we call it team scoring. And what we were able to do is they had experts all over that could review some qualitative work that candidates would submit in the form of maybe a spreadsheet they would modify, or analysis they would do, or an interview, and team scored according to criteria, which kind of like Olympic judges will score a figure skater. But these judges can be anywhere in the world, and they can apply their criteria to candidates all over the world. And so that really opened up a proper way for this organization to hire people all over the world, like it always did, but now they have a cloud-based platform to automate this for them. Another completely different eSkill usage. There's a well-known for-profit college that created skills tests in the various areas of technology that they have courses in. And they invited people to come to their website and take these tests for free. And what they did was they would look at all these candidates who came to their website and took these tests, and those became leads that they would use to say, hey, you should come to our school. And the ones that got a high score on those tests would be offered scholarships. So it transformed the way this school attracted students, attracted talent, and also could choose as a merit-based way who would get a scholarship.
That's transformative, huh?
Damn. That's really good. Boy, Jerry, this guy's come a long way since calling you up in the middle of the night with a down server, huh?
That's how it starts. That's how it starts.
Well, Eric, it's been a great conversation, and you're obviously a good CEO because you're able to say answers without getting yourself in trouble. That's a really good CEO there. That's someone who knows what to say without getting himself into any hot water. So nice job by you.
Oh, thank you.
And we appreciate you joining us today, Jerry. Great seeing you as always, and Eric, good luck. So, before we go? What's in the next 22 years for eSkill? Anything you could tell us?
Well, my mission is to keep expanding into the ways that we can assess candidates to make sure they have the best performing opportunities for them to do. So behavioral assessments, behavioral scoring, more video interviewing. We'll see. I mean, we'll see where the world of AI comes into play in talent assessment. I don't know if AI is going to replace very solid predictive scoring that you have from behavioral tests and skills tests, behavioral assessments, sorry. But AI might have a role in scoring video interviews, as is being tried now by some of the vendors with very mixed results. But as AI matures, it might get better at predicting without bias, how someone might perform based on how they perform in an interview, for instance.
Interesting. All right, cool. Well, we'll be looking forward to that. Eric, thanks again for taking the time today.
Thank you.
That was Eric Friedman, the founder and CEO of eSkill. To find out more about Eric and his team, go to eSkill.com. This has been The Great Digital Transformation with Gerard Zatvani. To participate in the conversation, go to gerardzatvani.com. The Great Digital Transformation is a production of Forbes Books.